Okay, folks, I have Aristo with me again today, and he came up with a tentative title. It might change before the end of the video, who knows, but we're starting out with manipulated common sense, and I'm going to let Aristo take it away, and I may interrupt him here and there, but mostly you're going to be doing the talking, Aristo. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Ron, once again, and interrupt away because I'm not quite sure where this is going, as usual. The title just came up 5 minutes before I came online with you. And why? Well, because we think in terms of common sense most of the time. We do not think in terms of inspiration, exclusive inspiration, or some kind of otherworldly thought process or something strange. You know, we go back to what we consider common sense in order to be able to relate to the world and to each other. There was once a psychology book, I think it said, all you need to know you learned before the first grade or something, something like that. And in the sense that we have an instinctive understanding of the world, but we also have our early relationships teaching us things. And so if you have, for example, in your situation, you relate to people a certain way, you always resort to common sense. Again, if we're online, we see this more than anything. I mean, common sense is not just a universal thinking process. Common sense is also localized. We have local common sense with our peers or with people around us. You're sitting on a Facebook discussion, for example, or a forum or something like that. And you need to be able to relate to your peers, either through some common topic, with which where you agree. Even if you disagree at times, you need to have a certain basis of agreement. And all of this is common sense. So the question is, if your common sense is manipulated, then you're really off your game, so to speak. You're really screwed in many ways in how you relate to the world. If your common sense is manipulated, then you are being manipulated in a matrix reality frame. Because your common sense is very basic. So to the point that in order to liberate yourself, it might seem that you move toward uncommon sense. In many cultures, the archetype of the wise person is actually the fool, the trickster.
Right.
Sometimes you actually, like I was looking again at the Garden of Eden story, and you have the serpent there. And again, I read the actual, the New Testament and all of the Old Testament, and it says, basically, it calls this thing a serpent. It doesn't say it's the devil. It doesn't say it's a demon. It doesn't say it's some fallen angel. We assume it's a metaphor for something. But really, it says, of all the beasts in the field, this one was the most clever. So it basically says it's a beast of the field. It's an animal. And if this was a shamanic tale, it would be an animal totem and a trickster. You got those Native American stories about Coyote. Coyote does this and that. He's the trickster, and sometimes he falls for his own tricks. Sometimes other people do. And here we have a serpent that essentially tells the truth, but not the whole truth, and keeps, is a little bit deceptive, or there's innuendo in here, and you don't know if the serpent wants to help Adam and Eve or not. It seems that the serpent prompts them to disobey the Lord, so to speak, but then perhaps this is a good thing in the end, because they need to grow out of this little. These were two people who could not tell the difference between what was good and what was not. They couldn't tell the difference between what was healthy, what was unhealthy. The two terms you see, Tov and Raa, that are the Hebrew words for good and evil, basically it means one thing that's obvious and natural and helpful and good, that supports a sustainable dynamic, but the other one is basically anything else. Technically, it could be bad, it could be good. The same word is translated as friend and enemy. So essentially, it means shepherd. It means anything. It could be dysfunctional, but it could be functional. It's just risky because it's not the tried and true, natural, accepted way of the Lord, so to speak. So it sets up the question, maybe there's ways that you don't do what God tells you that are actually part of what you should be doing. Learn how to act independently, basically, of the so-called Lord. And that's like the next step in the Kabbalistic tree of life. You have, these spheres that are mapping out states of awareness, states of being, worlds. And you have first, the sphere of the first, the alpha, the sphere of the omega, the last. Then you have the mystery of good. And then you have the mystery of Ra, which is translated as evil. What's this mystery of evil thing? And why is it part of the tree of life? But it's not the mystery of evil. It's basically the mystery of independent thinking, acting on your own initiative, taking another way than what's obviously good. It implies that, look, there is not always one solution, one thing that's good, because if we keep doing that one thing, we're stuck in this little garden enclosure of a few options. And so the religion says, well, that's the will of God. You don't need free will. All you need to do is the good things. So God tells you there's 10 good things you need to do. That's all you need to do. So where's free will among those little 10 things? So why are we messing ourselves up? Because we're trying to learn to act independently of this will of God. And that's the will of God, capital W. The true will is for us to be free. Allegedly, even this Bible says that we are the beings of free will. We have free choice. And then it tries to keep convincing us that the only reason we are given free will is so we can choose to be slaves, and that's messed up, choose to be obedient.
Really messed up.
And then you have the serpent, which was allowed to be there allegedly to test us. So, would we really be good if we chose to just be obedient slaves, or would we actually be a failure creation? Oh man, I chose these people to be free and make their own choices and grow and take risks. And here they are, choosing to come back to mama and papa, into the apron strings all the time.
Well, I read, someone sent me I forget I forget both who sent it and who the speaker was, and I'm probably going to do a video on it in the future, but painted the picture, from Deuteronomy. It was a commentary on the book of Deuteronomy in the Bible. Mm-hmm. And God, I'm somebody that's read the Bible a lot, and God is not a nice being. A very manipulative, control freak type of thing that punishes, ridiculous punishments for violating his will.
Why did the Gnostics say that this God here is not the real one? They actually came out and said, and they were the heretics and all of this, that this kind of God that treats things like this. In fact, the word God came later. This is a much later translation. The actual word is Jehovah Elohim, or Yahweh Elohim, where Elohim is like a plural. Conservative commentators say, no, it's like how kings call themselves we the queen, and so how ridiculous can you get? It's just a way of expression. No, Elohim is, because here God talks to himself, is because one of the most interesting phrases in the book of Genesis is when the expulsion of the garden goes, he goes, oh, well, now we got to kick them out, not because they're disobedient, but because if they start eating of the fruit of the tree of life, they're going to be like us. Yeah. Yeah. So who is us? And then you have all these New Age theories about ETs and Anunnaki and all of this and that. But the point is, how do we know that this whole exposition is not a veiled encouragement to be like Elohim? Every mystic wants to be like Elohim. Being a mystic for a religionist, for a fundamentalist Christian or Muslim, fundamentalist Muslim burn mystics also, and Christians did too. Mysticism is the bane of religion in many respects, not all religion. Sometimes they're integrated. There are Christian saints who are mystics and Hebrew saints and all of this.
Well, the point is, all of the religions have their mystical aspect.
Exactly. But when the mystic veers from Tov, which is the tried and true religious structure that fits the little group, and goes into Ra, which is independent thinking, breaks the box and goes out of the matrix, then they become a heretic. The word heretic means somebody who questions the status quo, So we're all heretics, and trying to purify us of our free will, basically, is what the punishment of heresy goes. And so we have our common sense, however, is an evolution from Tov to Raa, is from, because again, Yehovah Elohim said, you can eat of this so-called fruit of the tree of life all you want, as long as you don't touch the tree of knowledge. Meaning you can have immortality, life force, powers, as long as you have no clue what they mean and where to use them. So as long as you remain deaf, dumb, and blind, sure, fucking be spiritually advanced. But, as soon as you become discerning and your eyes are open, you got to be weak. We have to castrate you. We have to hobble you. And basically our common sense, our true common sense, our sense of humanity. Common sense for me is our human sense. So our human sense is meant to be a fusion of what the benefits of this tree of life is and what the benefits of this tree of knowledge is. And they essentially are the same tree, the same pathway, the same pillar of heaven and earth, because a tree is a pillar between heaven and earth, and it bears fruit. You can also say that, in the thing. But I'm using this analogy, and I want to post a blog article on this thing again, because it's kind of fascinating to me, of how discernment is called evil. Being able to tell the difference between what's good for you and what isn't is called evil. And so in order not to be empowered,
got to be ignorant.
You have to be ignorant, or dead. Basically you have and the more humans were going, God saw, well, these humans are sinners, so we have to shorten their lifespan even more, and it's like, well, you left them really no choice. They're out there and they're sinners. It sounds more like you're restricting them. And instead, all of these so-called sinners are being bolstered. We look at the world today and it seems like the so-called devil is helping all the sinners. I mean, the psychopaths, the ones that are really into hurting other people, and even if it hurts themselves in the end. So it's like a disease. It's not like, well, remove the sinners and we'll be fine. To me, all of these alleged solutions that have never worked, I mean, look at history, look at everything, look at all the so-called solutions, all the thoughts, that's why it pays to be well read sometimes, not just in your culture, but across the board, to understand what people have proposed and what they have tried. And to look at history to see, well, it doesn't matter even if history is a lie. Look at where we are now. The shit didn't work. If it would have worked, maybe some things were proposed that could work if they were allowed, but they weren't allowed. They were persecuted. For example, before Christianity, the biggest persecutions in the Roman Empire were against alchemists. Not because they were making gold, because alchemy didn't start out that way. There was a branch like that. And you could easily rationalize it like that, but there were no people coming out and saying, here's gold. There was no proof. The Romans weren't stupid. It was because these were mystics that were, creating independent thinking and independent feeling. For the same reason then that when the Christians took over, and they really didn't, you really had the same power structure, just with a different ideology.
Different name.
Exactly, a different name and a different way of controlling things. The Roman Empire basically used military force purely, and they allowed people to go worship whatever the hell they wanted to, because most of them were slaves anyways. Christians liberated the slaves, but kept everybody slaves of the mind.
Mental box.
Exactly. They figured that it's a lot more efficient. You can't have enough armies to keep them down, because you might be able to have a whole slave system here, but then you have a whole bunch of barbarians that are going to come and mow it down at some point. So then it was like global domination, after, the Roman Empire, which had a parallel empire in China, the point was slowly global domination. In the West, China was content to remain within certain boundaries until now. You have this whole world, and all of this, what does this have to do with our title? Because things get by because of manipulated common sense. You wonder, why doesn't God intervene? Well, why didn't God intervene in the Garden of Eden, if you want to take that mythology? Why didn't Yehovah Elohim say, hey, these people are supposed to make their own choice. We can't allow these serpents to come in and mess with their, thinking process. Really, if it was going to be fair, now why would they have allow this serpent to come in and start messing with them? Let them think it out for themselves, if that was the case. Because if they couldn't tell the difference between what's good and what's bad, how could they possibly make any responsible choices? It's ridiculous. The whole reasoning of this biblical interpretation, in my opinion, is flawed. Till I even heard somebody online, he was a rabbi, I think, he said, well, one opinion is that God did want them to do this, to get out into the world and start growing up. It was a setup, you know. But the whole point is, the key here is that we are now looking for the tree of life. We already have the tree of knowledge. We can tell what's good and what's bad, because if we can't, we're psychopaths. And they really know the difference too. They just know, are compelled to do the so-called, to promote suffering in others because it allows them a measure of control. They are power hungry. They're not greedy financially. They already have that. This is mainly an American ideology that it's all about the money. It isn't all about the money. Once you got the money, then everything's supposed to be cool, but it's not, because there's never enough money. It's greed. Greed is a power lust. It's an empty black hole within the soul that can never be filled, because what it desires is destruction. It's annihilation. It's a form of nihilism. So this nihilism is a disease that cannot be eradicated by eliminating the carriers of the disease. That doesn't work. It would be, if you want to talk in a kind of spiritual sense, you cannot redeem humanity by destroying principalities. That does not work that way. It hasn't worked that way. It's been tried. So we are challenged, in my honest opinion. Again, it comes back to our own responsibility, and not blaming any other beings and whatever, because we have everything we need. We have the knowledge, the fruits of knowledge and discernment that have become a little bit atrophied, because right now we are cut off from the so-called tree of life, but we're also being undermined in terms of the tree of knowledge. Our reality frame is being screwed up. Our common sense is being manipulated. But yet that common sense is within us. It's part of our DNA. So even if epigenetically it's scrambled, we can reclaim it, and we must reclaim it first, in my honest opinion, because it's garbage in, garbage out. It's first, what you put in first must be taken out last. So what you put in last must be taken out. So if you eat the tree of knowledge, if that's your final act before you get expelled from paradise, you have to reclaim the fruit of the tree of knowledge. You have to awaken your discernment, and then you can go for the tree of life, because if you just go for the tree of life without any discernment, even if you manage to get it, you won't know the difference. It won't matter. And it can be taken away from you at the drop of a hat. Anybody can take candy from a baby, And if you're in that state of so-called innocence, you are nothing more than an infant, spiritually speaking. So when we see the world as it is, we understand that when our thoughts and our conclusions don't work, that means our common sense is really not our true sense. It's manipulated in some way. Now, if you don't want to go into if it's manipulated, then it's a conspiracy theory. If you don't want to say that, just say, well, it's some kind of spiritual disease. It's something, In fact, it's not the way it should be. You are experiencing the realm of Ra, but not in the way that you should. Ra is not evil. Ra is beyond the box, and it can be both. It could be good, it could be bad, it could be, but it's risky all the time. It's uncertain. It could be chaos. It's not the peace of the tried and the true. That's some other zone. When the divine moved from the center of its own essence into multiplicity, there were spheres of becoming, layers and layers of experience, according to the Kabbalistic philosophers. And these layers of experience basically became creation. So before we entered into this iffy realm where the fall occurred, and the fall didn't just occur with humanity, before humanity it occurred in the divine creation process itself, a shattering in some zone, because creation distanced from the divine could not sustain itself. And yet that was the plan, to create something independent. In essence, God wanted to create an equal in those terms, if you're a monotheist, or a deist. A mystic would view it differently. A panentheist who views the divine within creation as well as beyond creation already. Basically, the divine wanted to multiply, to become more of itself, and each part would contain the whole, and they would have a coexisting, co-relationship with everything. Everything would be interconnected. So the whole point of creation was relationship. And that is what we are healing right now. That is what it's like, why did God do this? Because God had never had relationship. So how could there be experience in this realm? You know, true divine experience. Singularity is fine. Everybody can just become one and squeeze into their little embryonic self, and everything's blissful and eternal and all is well and pure. But then as soon as you want to extend into otherness, and this is where the concept of Ra comes in. It's like, well, ultimately, in my honest opinion, the mystical truth of good and evil, of Tov and Raa, and I don't mean good and evil in the Western sense, but this sense of conservative and liberal, you know, you might say, within the box and beyond the box, you know. Basically, it's the sense of you are ultimately able to sense your own internal divinity. That is what mystics do. They introvert, and then you can re-extrovert and relate to the divinity of the other. Realizing your own divinity is well and good. You know, that's one thing. It is challenging to do this, but there is precedence. Let's look at any mystical tradition, you know. However, if you want to realize the divinity of other people, it's not enough to just be some new ager pretending you're love and light floating through the tulips, you know, and everything's fine. You're going to be challenged about what about this, what about that? And then what do people do? They congregate into their little in-groups where they have things in common that remind them about themselves. We are all one, and my honest opinion is a cop-out. We are not all one. Unity is within us. That's a whole different story. You know, singularity is within each of us. Unity, though one, is within us. And in that sense, we are all the one, but the one is not satisfied with just being the one. It wants to be us. And we want to be that. And that is a whole new creation and a whole new common sense, a true common sense. And that is where paradise lies, because we don't want to go back to paradise. We want to globalize it. We want to universalize it. Paradise is just one little thing, a garden, an enclosed, a little test tube, you might say, you know. And we're not going to go there because right there is the one place where we can find the tree of life. That's where the so-called cherub says, no, you can't come back. But you can't come back and you can't live there, or you can't trash it. But the thing is, that is where the mystic goes, because in that enclosure, you find the divine within. And then from there, you find the tree of life. And then from there, you open up again to your discernment of what is beyond your boundary of self, your boundary of being. You know, you don't try to assimilate everything as you, because when it's not you, when it's other, oh, that's when we all get into conflict. No, it's not about learning to just get along. It's learning to see the divine when it's not just you or in you. And that is what love is. That is when love is realized. You know, it's not just phase one, infant love, selfishness, you know. Cosmic selfishness is not what we're after. We are after our true common sense. Now, apparently, this is a very conflicting dynamic. It is where the gap in creation happened, this sense of meeting the other. That is actually a reflection of ourselves, but not a direct one, because we're here to give the other the benefit of the doubt of being themselves without having to identify with them. We don't want to identify with our lovers. We want them to be themselves. And we want to identify with ourselves, and then this magic thing called relationship comes up. And see, this can be personal, but we're also dealing with it globally. Because right now, what the globalists and psychopaths who deny love are doing is denying that there can be any relationship. They bullshit us with all this, oh, we have to get along, multiplicity, this and that. But if you try to control people and take away their freedom and take away their minds and mind control and all of that, you know, that just means that, you know, you just want to be you. And ultimately, the psychos will be duking it out amongst themselves until one remains and everybody else is just a dumb slave. And then it's just going to be, well, now it's all meaningless, and I know it's meaningless, and there's nobody to doubt it, so let's do away with it. It's self-destruction, you see, either love or self-destruction. And this is the interplay, because love, that's the motivation for love to be realized. The stakes are high. And all of this is true common sense. It's not just Ari's common sense or Aristo's common sense here. It is true common sense if you're able to stand back from the manipulation and view the point in a more mystical sense, or in a more a sense where you can combine the internal sense of you with what you're confronting in the world. All the conflict, all the craziness, everything. In that sense, those people who say, oh, God works in mysterious ways, it's God's plan, yes, they're right, you know, because you need to move through this crazy zone. It doesn't mean we're being punished. The crazy zone is what it is. It's a crazy zone. It's a dysfunctional zone.
So the way to sanity is through insanity.
Something like that. Yeah, the way to sanity, but not the old sanity. We want a new sanity. We want a liberated sanity, an unbounded sanity. Because the previous sanity, that if we control things and if we try to limit them, we're going to go into the bounded sanity, the infantile sanity of the so-called garden enclosure, the garden of delights, a beautiful little amusement park for the gods. And that's fine, but it gets boring after a while. We're talking about immortality here. We're not talking about a little lifespan where you actually have 20 years of youth that you can really, be vital and run around. And, the rest of it is just, downhill or uphill. We want the tree of life where we can really, but we want to be able to enjoy life. And to enjoy life, you have to be able to discern and not according to whatever anybody else says, So we are responsible for our opinions. Other people are not responsible for our opinions. We are not responsible for other people's opinions. If we can take our opinions and genuinely discern them toward true common sense that can be common, then we can communicate. And if we find friction along the way, then that exposes the problem. Right now, we are afraid to experience the problem. It's scary, it hurts. So we need to be careful how we approach it. Of course, we don't want the problem to consume us. We don't want to be victims, but we need true common sense that we can share. Because right now, what I see, for example, in social media is people are flipped out with conflict. Everybody, so of course you got these shills and this and that and trolls, but if you have true discernment, you can tell who that is. You say, okay, fine. You don't have to go, oh, you're this and you're that. People, the longest threads are the ones where people come in and bitch at each other. You think they like doing it. And I think they like doing it. They enjoy it. People are repressed in life. They want to go and scream at their boss, scream at their parents, scream. Everybody has this thing, scream at each other, And that's why people are so violent. There's so much repressed aggression that can't circulate because it's really aggression against yourself. But it's not truly hatred. It's just outrage. There's a difference. All of this falls under the purview of common sense, and I could be going on and on. So
yeah, we've got a couple more minutes left to get to the half hour.
Okay. I could be going on and on, I said, but I'm hoping that the listener can get my drift here, because I can't go and demand or just say, oh, you have to be a mystic now. The thing is, you are challenged to live in a world where all of the crap out there is your teacher. Now, that's hard to digest because we consider teachers to be nice people who tell us, who try to take us and slowly allow us to absorb knowledge. No, this is the actual revealer. There's a difference. The teacher actually, let me rephrase that, is within you. You can awaken your inner teacher. You have discernment. You are discerning because it's part of us. That's what that myth means. It's not completely lost. These psychos would not be going to so many lengths. I've said this time and again, so many lengths to keep us dumbed down and confused if there was a reason, nothing to be afraid of for them. Our discernment is ready to fire up. It's ready to ignite. It's right there on the verge, and we're not allowed leeway, even a little inch. The only time we're allowed leeway with a controlled opposition is so we can be analyzed and categorized, and so countermeasures can be, created against us. It's the surveillance system. That's what the surveillance system is for. It's not to figure out who's a threat and then go kill them. It's to figure out behavior patterns and then get rid of everybody, stop them. Countermeasures, counterintelligence, counter-revolution, countermeasures, all of these counter. And yet the counter zone is the domain of Ra. because the good stuff, that's, you know, the regular stuff that works, the conservative loving stuff is Tov. That's the, but then it's not enough. See, the problem is the reason the bad guys, so-called, are getting away with shit is because we are letting them do it and own the sphere of beyond the box. They're the ones going outside of the box. Yeah, they may be threatening us. You're sitting there, for example, on the internet, you're in the thread, you want to express a radical opinion in a way that is not taken as a threat or hostile or insulting. And so the troll comes in to intimidate you and mess you up and make you either look bad or sound bad or just withdraw. And so that's the way they claim the territory of novelty, the territory of innovation. We can't innovate. And we're not innovating technologically here. We're innovating esoterically, spiritually, mentally, ideologically. This is what we need right now. This is our true technological field. It's the field of common sense. It's the field of mental innovation, of discernment innovation, you know. And we are creative individuals. This is where we can prove our worth. We don't have to go into some physical battlefield at some point, you know, at this time at least, or whatever, or maybe never. It all depends on how we use our discernment and how we define true common sense. So that's what I wanted to say today. Thank you once again for being patient with me, those of you who have.
Okay, thank you, Aristo.